Good afternoon and welcome everyone. So my name is Andrew Tyra. I'm the Challenge Director for the Robots for a Safer World programme across UK RI. I'm really pleased you can join us this afternoon. So today's session is looking at robots for a more resilient future. Initially, we're going to look at some exciting videos of some of the projects we've funded, but then we're going to open to a panel where you can engage with the panel around the future of resilient robotics, how government might see things, how the research councils and how some of the investment community see the future of robotics. So the actual resilient Robots for Resilient Future call was launched last September. We were very fortunate to gain another £15 million of funding from BEIS to look at robots beyond extremely challenging environments and extend the existing challenge. And we ran a £7 million collaborative research and development activity, and we funded 38 projects, some of them quite small with just individual organisations and some collaborative. And those range from agri-tech to logistics to construction, very much a broad scope of activity. And that was very purposeful to not to take us away from extremely challenging environments where we'd run the £93 million programme, but actually to look at more service robots in other sectors and industries, either transferring knowledge from those areas or starting new lines of activity as well. And hopefully that will build towards this coming year's comprehensive spend review, and obviously more of that later with the panel potentially. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by looking at 9 of those videos from 9 individual projects that were funded last September. So all those projects last no more than a year, so they're lasting no more up to the end of this financial year. So they're quite quick projects, but certainly lots being done already, and we're really excited about the breadth of what's there. There was some press activity yesterday around some of those projects as well, so you can always go online and see some of the other projects we're not detailing today. But first of all, we'd like to start with the lead, which was Digital and Future Technologies Limited, and their project was called Applause, which is automated precision loading and unloading system environments. So thank you.
The Applause project focuses on the supply chain and looking at how we might use drones to carry goods in a more efficient, net zero manner. Through our works on Innovate UK's Robotics for a More Resilient Future competition, as part of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, we are creating new robotic drone landing systems that can automatically load and unload drones, removing the need for the human to place the cargo into the drone. As all drones are currently remotely piloted, the Applause project acts as a remote loading interface mechanism for the remote pilot. We're working with the NHS and various mail carriers to create systems that work for all, with an emphasis on health and safety and freight logistics optimizations. We believe that our work as part of this competition will set the standard for drone parcel freight automation, providing a demonstrator for logistics companies globally. Digital and Future Technologies.
Excellent, thanks very much. So the next video is from Housebots and is wall climbing, damp proofing and paint applicator robots. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Jack, CEO of Housebots, and we build robots to protect and maintain buildings and infrastructure. Our vision is a future where humans' feet don't have to leave the floor in the world's most dangerous activity, which is work at height, including all of the cost and disruption involved. Our wall climbing robot can deal with any surface, rough, smooth, curved, flat, magnetic, non-magnetic, and we've already attached multiple items for inspection use cases such as cameras and concrete sensing equipment. Our grant through the Robotics for Resilient Future Fund in partnership with Safeguard Europe, a coatings manufacturer, is to improve the precision and capabilities of our painting attachment, specifically focused on exterior paint jobs in the housing sector. We're looking for partners to trial and test our equipment, from contractors through to asset owners. Please get in touch.
Thank you. So the next project is Aqualife Services Limited and is around automated human inoculation. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christian from Aqualife Services. We're a company who specialise in the mass vaccination of fish on fish farms around the world. Recently we've seen an opportunity to transfer our knowledge to the mass vaccination of humans in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. We procured funding from Innovate UK to develop a proof of concept robot that can safely deliver vaccine into humans. We believe this is innovative, as there are currently no other methods of automated human vaccination on the market to help reduce the load on the NHS or other health boards around the world. We are partnered with Omron UK, who are market leaders in industrial automation, and also Peacock Technology, who are an engineering consultancy who specialise in electronics and automation for progressive companies. We have just recently started this project, and our next steps are to develop the computer vision system that will help target the injection sites on a human arm safely. We would be keen to speak with anyone about the regulatory side of robots carrying out medical functions, and with people who have knowledge of innovative sensors that could be used in soft robotics for controlling how hard something is being gripped. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So the next project is from Consequential Robotics Limited and is a pet-like socially assistive robot to support health and well-being. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tony Prescott, Director of Research for Consequential Robotics, here to tell you about our project, a pet-like socially assistive robot to support health and well-being. Our company, Consequential Robotics, combines world-leading expertise in biomimetic robotics and artificial intelligence with award-winning industrial design. Our first product, now in its third generation, is the animal-like Miro E robot that has sold over 350 units worldwide. In our new project, we will work to develop a redesigned robot, the MX, to support the health and well-being of children in hospitals and schools. Our project will develop an enhanced version of Miro with improved processing, 5G connectivity, better scene awareness, and social artificial intelligence. With our hospital and school partners, we will also work to develop use cases, market understanding, and designs for the next generation MX robot that are optimized for therapy applications with children.
Again, thank you. So the next project is from Inner Machines and is the feasibility of causal learning system for robotic transportation and materials handling. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Peter Rawbone. I'm founder and director of Inner Machines. Inner Machines is a new AI startup very much concerned with the question of non-algorithmic computation. That means computational techniques that, while prospective for artificial intelligence, nevertheless can't be expressed using standard digital computers. So our Innovate UK project is concerned with non-algorithmic transduction, how light, energy and visual information can be converted into computational patterns, and also non-algorithmic generality, how computation and behavior can be created from scratch. So if anyone watching is interested in novel, experimental, artificial techniques for robotics, we'd love to hear from you. Please get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to turn to agriculture. So we've got a project from Muddy Machines, which is building resilient robotic harvesters for high-value field vegetables. Thank you.
COVID-19 has shown us the importance of a resilient food system with access to nutritious and fresh food. Looking after our planet means we need to prioritize local food production wherever feasible. However, UK farming is under threat due to a severe harvest labor shortage. So to maintain domestic production of fine vegetables, the only real long-term answer is harvest automation. We at Muddy Machines have teamed up with the research arm of the UK's largest asparagus grower, Cobry Farms, and WMG of Warwick University to develop a commercially viable and cyber-secure green asparagus harvester prototype. It's not only cheaper than labor, but robotic harvesting is more consistent and accurate and promises unprecedented yield gains to the growers. Currently, there is no such solution available in the market. Right now, we are raising our seed round in order to expand our technology from asparagus to additional crops and would love to speak to investors and partners that want to join us on this journey.
Thank you very much for that. So now we're going to hear from Krover, another agri-tech program, talking about swimming through the grains, robotic device for the autonomous monitoring of cereal grains in long-term storage. Thank you.
SOAS inspections are lengthy and expensive to conduct, but needed for everyone's daily convenience. Robotics inspections of these assets is quicker and safer, Combine this with fault recognition and prediction, and you have a tool to detect areas with maintenance need in an automated way. Our project focuses on integrating AI and machine learning to video data acquired by an aerial drone specially designed to conduct principal sewer surveys. Our consortium is made of 4 partners: Clockworks Technologies, the industrial lead and developer of tailored UAVs, the University of Hertfordshire Big Data Lab, and Intentech, to facilitate machine learning and process the data effectively, and Sewer Surveys UK to supply data for model development, liaise with the end users and advise on their experience and needs. We want to create a state-of-the-art solution and better the tools currently used to eventually remove the need of human intervention from this dangerous environment. Talk to us if you want to collaborate or know more about the project. Thanks.
Apologies, I think we might have played a video out of turn there. I think you've just heard from Clockwork Technologies Limited, which was holistic principal tunnel sewer survey system using unmanned aerial vehicles and artificial intelligence. So thank you for that. And obviously we'll go back to the preceding video.
At Krover, we've developed a world-first underground drone, and we're currently focused on using it to help grain storage operators maintain the quality of their stock. A Krover is the first robotic device able to swim through grain. The Krover robot is based on a novel physical effect which I discovered during my PhD at the University of Edinburgh. This effect, which we're starting to call the Krover method, enables an object to move through bulk solids. We have already been granted a UK patent on the Krover method, and we have 2 families of international patent applications on our technology. Our mission at Krover is to become the global leaders in underground robotics, and the first step towards that mission is to help grain storage operators reduce their mass and quality losses by at least 80%. And we need your help with £500,000 of investment to make this a reality. So if you think you can help Krover reach every grain, please invest in us and help us start #SavingGrains.
Thank you, and sorry about that. So we've now got the final video from EchoBolt, which is called EchoBolt Bug.
As the UK continues its rapid expansion of offshore wind, a priority for the sector is to reduce the cost of operations and maintenance. Everything from repairing the largest blades to inspecting thousands of bolts. Currently, offshore wind turbine bolts are periodically check-tightened with heavy, high-pressure hydraulic tooling to ensure they haven't begun to relax. Check tightening is the biggest scheduled maintenance task for wind turbine operators, incurring significant costs and turbine downtime. 2021 will also see EchoBolt partnering with UK robotics specialists Bladebug to deliver a new project to prove the concept of automating bolt inspections using crawling inspection robotics, bringing the vision for an autonomous future for wind turbine maintenance one step closer.
Excellent. So I think that was an excellent set of projects. As I said, that's 9 of 38, so only a quarter of the project we funded under that particular competition. It's really good to see such a breadth of activity. So what we're going to do now is go to a panel session, and I'll shortly introduce the speakers and they'll say a few words about themselves. But before I do that, if you'd like to pose any questions to the panel, please start to use the chat, and I'll hope to moderate that as well as I can as we go through the rest of the session. So first I'm going to introduce Anna Angus-Smith from EPSRC. Anna.
Thank you, Andrew. Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Angus-Smith from the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. We're a big primary public funder of research innovation in the UK, for those of you who don't know. And my team and I work quite hard to support a quite broad portfolio of research and innovation activities in robotics, autonomous systems and AI. So happy to pick up kind of questions and conversations about that. I also work very closely with Andrew and his team in connecting up between research and innovation, and with both Harry and Andrew on this panel today, and thinking about how do we make the case for the future of robotics and autonomous systems in the UK. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Hannah. So now we're going to hear from Dominic Keane, who's representing BritBots.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm the founder of BritBots, which is an active private sector investor in UK robotics and automation companies. So over the last 4 or 5 years, we've backed about 25 really exciting businesses in this space. And in fact, of the videos we've just seen, we're the lead investor in Housebots, Money Machines, and Bladebug. So we like to do a lot of stuff with companies that are also winning Innovate UK project support.
Thank you, Dominic. And last, Harry.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone. Really pleased to be here. My name is Harry Rentala, and I sit in the Technology, Strategy and Security team within the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And I lead our team's work setting the policy that helps unlock the opportunities from a number of key high potential technology sectors. Of course, one of those is robotics and autonomous systems, where we work very closely, as Anna said, with UK RAI, as well as colleagues in other parts of Whitehall, like the Office for AI, Centre for Connected Autonomous Vehicles, Made Smarter, and so on. So looking forward to today's discussion now and in the collaboration zone afterwards.
Thanks, Harry. Unfortunately, Claire Asher was going to join us today as well, but for personal reasons, she can't attend. So I'm not sure if anything's coming through just now on the chat. So please do put through some views. I think I'll kick off with the panel, and I will try to maybe have to answer a few questions on behalf of Innovate as well. So I do apologise as chair. I may have some views on my own. But certainly looking towards the comprehensive spending review, currently obviously government is looking at the value of robotics across the economy in the future. So I didn't know if maybe we'll start with Dominic around, you're obviously funding robotic companies. What are you looking for when you invest in these types of organisations?
Well, I guess as we've evolved over the last few years, we've come to see really the crucial factor for us is the opportunity that robotics can deliver to productivity in whatever segment or sector or task that they're happening to operate. So I guess as a private sector investor, what really turns us on is a credible plan where a team of roboticists can create both the technology and the business proposition to actually move into perhaps an existing area of activity in the economy, or perhaps a completely sort of greenfield area of value creation, but deliver an outcome that is dramatically more productive than what currently exists. And as you can imagine, in just the state of robotics and the technology at the moment means that there are just countless opportunities for this sort of thing to really make really substantial economic impact. So we're very, very excited about the next few years.
And if I may, Harry, how do you look from a policy perspective? Obviously, there's great work within the academic sector and also in the business sector about forming a case around the investment we might have in robotics and how that can help the economy going forwards.
Of course. The first thing I think to say is that government has clearly set out significant ambitions for science and technology as a whole, repeatedly, both in Build Back Better, the Plan for Growth, as well as the Integrated Review, and I'm sure many of you are looking out for the innovation strategy that's expected later in the summer. So it's a good starting point from which to be making the case for investment in something as potentially transformative as robotics and autonomous systems. We do have to recognise the financial context is probably the most challenging it's been for a number of decades, and so it is going to be competitive even within that significant science and technology ambition. There's a handful of things I think we tend to look for and try to enable, I suppose. Firstly, it is really helpful where, as far as possible, we can build some degree of consensus across the sector as to where government intervention is most helpful. Clearly, you're never going to be entirely one voice, but as much as we can build a common foundation, that's really helpful. And the second thing is the need to be really quite clear and very specific about how government support for robotics and autonomous systems can help contribute to government's macro objectives. That is, things like net zero and levelling up, productivity, growth, resilience, and so on, and be able to support this with evidence everyone says that you know it's sort of fashionable to say that what you're doing supports net zero at the moment, but you need to be really clear why that is and how that creates value in that within that particular domain. And the third thing I'll say is we want to understand where is it essential that government acts and why, and where can the private and academic communities expect to leverage that government intervention to deliver extra societal and public value. I think the final thing I'll say is I think we need to ask ourselves some quite challenging questions about the adoption issue. Delivering and developing great technology is important, and it's obviously great, but that is adoption is ultimately where so much of the public value will come from, and it's a really tricky thing. So I think we need to take a long, hard look at how we unlock that, really.
Thank you. Anna, in terms of the academic activities, robotics are very strong in academia. So how are you able to link up to, if you like, the end users and some of the industrial people who might commercialise that basic research?
I think that's an interesting question. I think it relates, in fact, back to the comments to me that both Dominic and Harry were making about how we think about the case of public investment. I think it's very important that we identify where we need to make public investment. Where does the government need to act to connect up the substantial capability and capacity we have in the UK in the academic base to companies? And that happens organically in many places. And it also happens through things like the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund projects that Andrew and I work with very closely. But there's also a piece that for me sits underneath that yes, there's the connection between academia and industry, but a big piece for me of the case for the future investment in robotics that Harry was just talking about is how do we make sure that we have the long-term capability and capacity that means that you might have some of those partnerships in the future, that you might have some of the new capabilities and new technologies that emerge in 10 years' time. And I think our role in the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council aspect of UK RAI sitting next to Innovate UK is how do we make sure that we have the skills, how do we make sure that we have those new technologies, and how do we motivate those to be, as Andrew was asking me, connected up to end user needs? How do we think about what's needed for those to be trusted by users, for example? And how can academic research and partnerships between academia and companies, many of whom are represented in the virtual room today, drive some of that trust as well as the capability and capacity for the future?
Thank you. And obviously from an Innovate perspective, we're very much around, driving, if you like, the knowledge from the research base into the industrial base. On that basis, I'd like really to ask Dominic around how do you obviously back individual organisations, not necessarily the technologies, it's about the people. How do you make sure that they can engage with end users in markets? Because obviously without those end users and the traction from the market, they won't have a business to capitalise on.
That's right. I guess I think just the sort of mass adoption of robotics in the mainstream economy it's still pretty early days. So whilst you have sectors like, for example, high volume manufacturing or some digital sectors which are heavily automated, actually there's a lot of education of that mainstream economic market to take place. And certainly what we've found over the last few years is those businesses which can actually, in their sort of relatively early stages of evolution, identify one or two kind of early adopter customers who have significant organizational buy-in from their side to take a bit of a risk and go slightly ahead of the pack in whatever they're doing to try out some of these things is absolutely essential. And unless businesses find that kind of, if you like, industrial counterparty relatively early on, however great the technology, it becomes very, very difficult for them. So I think the key thing for us is to kind of look at the tea leaves and see if that organization is either there or close to being there, and really help nurture the companies to build out in the first couple of years of operation with a small number of very enthusiastic early adopter customers, and use that as the platform then for further downstream growth. And unfortunately, a lot of the businesses we come across simply don't have that, and there's a lot of great technology sitting out there, but without those early adopter customers to unlock it's going to be very difficult, in our opinion.
Thank you. If any other speakers would like to add, obviously, please do. But Harry, I mean, one of the challenges is obviously from government perspective, you're the future technologies within BEIS. How do we make sure we are including the needs of MOD, the farming community, even agri-tech in, DEFRA, etc., and obviously, Department for Transport for logistics? How do we encompass their needs as an innovation agency, as an academic, support from EPSA, and then play out those policies across all of government?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think one of the great opportunities, but equally one of the challenges of robotics and autonomous systems is just the sheer breadth of applications, technologies, and sectors where it can be deployed. That creates huge opportunity, but it also means it can be quite challenging to get your arms around that, quite frankly, and to be able to tell a coherent, single, and unified story. How can we make sure we're encompassing those views? Look, I think there's been some conversation already about the need to make sure that where we are investing is sort of working towards something that end users, adopters want. That is obviously easier at the head of innovation technology end than it is potentially at the science end. But having that pull, I think, is really important, because ultimately that's where the value is going to be. I think it's also incumbent on government and on people like myself to help join the dots across what is quite a complicated landscape in order to make sure that when we are thinking about policy and when we are thinking about the strategic shape of the sorts of investment priorities that government wants to promote, that we are doing so in a coherent, joined up way. And I think set pieces like the innovation strategy and so on will be an opportunity for us to join at that thinking and tell a coherent picture.
Good, thank you.
Andrew, I was going to add, if I may, I think there's a really interesting role that we can play, perhaps, as UKRI and working with BEIS colleagues and others, to think about how we can almost connect the right people together in government. I think there's a really interesting point for me about how do you put together the people with some of the really big problems and challenges in robotics, autonomous systems, and more broadly in digital technologies in government, with the people like the people at this event who know a lot about the solutions, and enable some co-exploration of the problem space to actually work out what really is needed versus what perhaps colleagues might think they need in the first place. So I think that's a very valuable piece that we can do. I think there is the short-term question answering, which is about actually what are the immediate challenges and needs that government departments and colleagues need us to help with addressing and need to connect people to thinking about. But there are also, just going back at you spiked my interest with your mod comment to a conversation I was having with a mod colleague the other day. It builds very much on my comment about long-term capability and capacity, because actually in lots of government departments where there's a lot of knowledge about technology, it's thinking about challenges like validation and verification of systems and how they know that the emerging capabilities will happen after the ones that they're currently building on and deploying. That's of real interest to them. So there's a kind of connectivity piece there, as well as that long-term capability and capacity that I think they're counting on emerging over time, if that makes sense.
Good, and certainly for our part, we're very much engaged with a lot of those departments as well, and there is a lot of cross activity going on, and I think one of the things we are doing, not only with Harry and his team at BEIS, but also with the Research Council's Innovate colleagues, but other government departments and organisations, from the KTN, but also trade organisations and the Robotics Great Partnership. All these people are trying to get a consensus view so we can put those things together. And I think one of the chinks sometimes actually is that investment, because that doesn't come at the end, it quite often comes at the start for the small organisations. So I didn't know, Dominic, if there's any particular sectors that you think are buoyant at the moment, or are you just looking at robotics as an underlying technology when you start to invest in these areas?
Well, speaking for ourselves, we're quite application focused. So we really like entrepreneurs who can come and tell a pretty coherent story on day one about some end use applications of their technology, it always makes us a bit queasy where we come across a great technology, but no one's actually yet able to articulate where it might be used. That's not to say there isn't a role for some of those things, but as an investor who's looking to see, commercial uplift pretty quickly, that's kind of quite difficult for us. I think in terms of if you look at the buyer landscape, obviously sort of net zero is a really both politically attractive area to be in, but also a really attractive area of just customer demand in so many different sectors. So we're seeing, I'd say at least half of our investments going into something which, at least tangentially has a strong story to tell in terms of net zero or electrification or these sort of environmental areas, which I think is a really, really great thing. And I think robotics has a really strong role to play in that.
Thank you.
I'm being annoying and following up. I apologise. I was going to ask almost a follow-up kind of question, if I may, Dominic, which is one of the conversations I have with Andrew and lots of people is the kind of concept of cross-domain working in robotics. And I wondered how much you see things, maybe this is a silly question, but that you've seen demonstrated perhaps in a sector, and people are starting to move technologies across, robotic technologies perhaps, into another sectoral application, and they already have some demonstrated effect in one area, but now you're looking at them in another. Is that something you see much of, or is that a bizarre question?
No, it's not a bizarre question, but equally, I wouldn't say I've seen a lot of it, simply because I think, particularly if you look at mainstream, middle-sized businesses who might be adopters of robotics, I don't think they are sufficiently technically capable to go and hunt around the technology landscape and pick up something that might be used for something completely different and apply it to their own case in a lot of circumstances. So I think the need of industry tends to be actually given a solution which is pretty directly related to what they understand and shows an example of their problem being solved, rather than to go away and hunt around for a great technology that can be reapplied to what they want to do.
Okay, thank you. The chat's woken up, which is good. So, Harry, I think this one's for you, and it's probably a challenging question in some respects, about the fact that obviously there are increasing inequalities in the UK, and what is the policy around innovation in terms of automation replacing low-skilled jobs? Is there a paradigm shift? Are we all going to work sort of 3 or 4 days a week? Or, what are the challenges that you foresee in some of these policies and how they might have an impact if robotics is more taken in terms of the technology in the UK?
Sure. I'll make a few reflections. I should caveat this by saying that I'm rooted in a technology team, and there are vast swathes of other bits of government that spend their time thinking specifically about this as from a labour markets and workforce issue. So please, take that into account as you forward what I say. I think the macro point to make is that there are a lot of studies, and this is obviously a slightly disputed point in terms of the exact kind of measures, I guess, or the exact quantum of the impact. But there is a lot of evidence to suggest that the macro level, actually, the growth of automation supports productivity, and that in turn supports competitiveness, and therefore the growth of the businesses and the economy as a whole. So the idea is that, in theory, we should be growing the overall size of the pool, or the pie, as it were, at a macro level. Of course, that does gloss over that certain kinds of jobs, certain parts of the economy are likely to be more affected by automation than others. I think, what to say about that? I think government does recognise that there are those sorts of impacts, and indeed, as I say, that certain parts of the economy, certain kinds of jobs are more exposed to that. Yeah. I'm not able to reel them off the top of my head, but I'm aware of a number of initiatives taking place led by the Department for Work and Pensions, looking at skills retraining and so on, where I think there's a recognition that there's something that needs to be done about that. Equally, I also think this is going to be a transitional process. There's not going to be a switch that is flipped overnight where we're going to find mass changes in the structure of the economy. So I think there's an element of we have to adapt and respond to changes as they start to come through.
Thank you. And it's probably rather unfair of me to point that question straight to Harry, but in fact, I'll try to take up some of that myself as well from my experience in Innovate, because some of the challenges we've had, from not only government but industry and academia over the years is, well, are you going to put people out of work? And the response is all the studies actually show that you upskill people. You don't. So things do change. I'm old enough to remember typing pools, and no one has a typing pool anymore. But there's lots of coders who use typewriters or use keyboards nowadays. Things do move on. Autonomous vehicles could put cabbies out of work, and there are some changes in the economy that will take place. What we want to do is make sure, and one part of the mission from the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund is make sure that the UK is able to react, and actually not only react but lead some of that development, so we're in the right place at the right time, so we do upskill. So there will be impacts on labour markets going forward, but actually the UK can be at the forefront of that, and that's a good thing. And with the help of not only government investment and actually leveraging, another question came up around public sector procurement and how that can potentially lead some of these innovations. Some of you might know the SBRI programme, where government quite often through pre-procurement research look at how they can resolve some of their challenges. So you actually can create some end user solutions by actually being smart as a procurement customer. So we do work a lot with people across government, but across industry to try and make that so. So, obviously looking over the horizon about what's coming next, if we can react now rather than when it occurs, then being a bit more strategic is something we're doing and working with government on a lot at the moment. Another question, sorry.
I was going to be annoying and add, Andrew, in fact, that it's exactly why when you were thinking about the Robotics for a Safer World programme, a lot of the focus was actually on robotics for contexts where it isn't very safe for humans to be, which are some of those kind of much more obviously beneficial places where actually humans versus robots, in a nuclear reactor situation, for example, having a robot in some of those kinds of contexts is a much more appealing idea. I think that the only thing I just wanted to briefly add is sometimes I think we go for the kind of one-for-one replacement in these conversations. And I guess I hear a lot of it in terms of collaboration and working together in terms of, yes, there's the phrase cobots, but there's also how do you actually have different ways of doing things because you have new technological capabilities. It isn't always as simple as that. Replacing people in the workforce question, but actually enabling different kind of work or different kind of products to be made or different kind of collaboration with technology. Apologies, Andrew.
No, thank you. Someone's made a comment around some of the RGP Robotics Go partnership sessions. We're talking about software, not necessarily hardware. But I would stress that everything we're talking around it's a system of systems, really. A robot's made up of actuators and sensors and valves, etc. But actually, at the same time, it has to have some intelligence around running it. And obviously, some robots are more autonomous than others. And from that question, someone else has also asked, do we think that people spend more time solving challenges than solving new ones? In other words, developments quite often might go on in one part of the world or one part of the country, and people are oblivious to working on that elsewhere. For our part, obviously, we're always trying to get people to collaborate, so that doesn't happen. So I was going to point this really at Dominic to say, how do you identify if something is unique or novel or not being developed elsewhere? So therefore, whoever you invest in is maybe going to get a march on other people in the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is probably not very well, to be honest, simply because, as you say, there is just so much activity in this field all around the world. And actually, I guess we probably see that, the competitive advantages as much, if not more likely to come from the go-to-market activities and the sort of the structuring of the commercial part of the business as it is the technology itself. So even if there is a comparable or better technology sitting in, I don't know, South Africa or Australia or something like that, in these early days of robotics, I think the winners will be the people who are most effectively able to get to market and get to a global market. And that's only in part sort of determined by how great their technology. So it is very difficult to know, and arguably by the time you've spent searching all the state of the art around the world, the moment's passed anyway. So I think you have to sort of slightly go on instinct.
Right. And maybe if I can redirect that to Anna around, obviously research proposals are very competitive, and as are the innovate-led calls. So how do you gauge the value or potential of some of these proposals, who might be in very similar areas, but also might be very cost-cutting in nature, and therefore might have a wider potential to affect the economy?
That's a good question, and I think the bread and butter of what we do, certainly at the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, is peer review of proposals, and think about actually how do we use leading experts in the field to help us make some of those decisions when it comes to applications that come in from the community. How do we talk about, how do we ask people to assess actually how does this fit within a leading landscape? Is this going to be world-leading transformative research? To what extent has the team thought about the kinds of challenges it's going to address in the user context, and how have they thought about how it's going to get there? Those are questions that we ask throughout all of our peer review process and expect people to think about. And when we construct specific calls for proposals, as colleagues at Innovate do, we often, I'd say, in robotics and autonomous systems focus things, or in things around AI and digital technologies, really hone in on some of those questions about the things you need to think about for real world use. Yes, it's brilliant if you've got new theoretical capability advancement, but actually how are we going to make sure with a technological advancement that it is something that is informed by what use for users in the real world would look like. But I think it always has to come back from me to the opinions of key experts in the field and their peer review, Andrew, if that's not fobbing the question off.
No, thank you, and it's always a tough question. We've got about 3 minutes left, so I'm just going to go through one last question, and then we'll gather some collective thoughts. So someone's asking around, there's a great deal of attention on innovation and emphasis. Should more emphasis be placed on commercialisation rather than innovation? And I suppose to answer that in some respects, if it's talking about government funding, which I think you are here, I think we need a broad church in terms of where we leverage funds from. And it's not innovation is not a linear process. And from an Innovate perspective, obviously we have loans, we have interventions, we now work with VCs and other bodies to try and make sure that an organisation or an idea can grow and then be passed on in some respects quite often to the next person who might commercialise it. So I'm not sure if anyone had any thoughts around that in terms of from a policy perspective, Harry, from how do we look at innovation, or how do we look at grants or growth, to how the research base from Anna's perspective engages with that commercialisation, or from Dominic's perspective, how do you look at what's been done already and take that on into the future?
I think I'll have a short and probably quite simple response, Andrew, which builds on what you said, because we've looked at this question. We look at it repeatedly, as you'd expect, on a sort of almost cyclical basis. I think the answer inevitably is that there is no right balance of investment across that spectrum, that actually, exactly as you say, you do need a spread, and you might want to tweak how much you put in at different stages depending on the objectives you're trying to achieve. But ultimately, the most important thing is to keep feeding the pipeline at all stages.
Thank you.
I guess from my perspective, I'm not sure, particularly sort of mainstream SME organisations in the UK are very au fait or savvy with buying automation solutions of all sorts, and I think that is a structural weakness in our economy, and is a big problem for the ongoing development of this robotics sector. So I think there's a lot of work to be done by government to really get its head around that challenge, and to think how the mainstream economy can be better, I don't know, educated or supported to start to drive that pull through, because I think it would deliver a lot of benefits for them as well.
If I could say very quickly that completely resonates, Dominic, and I think the size of the challenge is encapsulated in the data that we have on the the long tail of business that actually hasn't adopted really off-the-shelf technology, customer relationship management solutions and that kind of stuff. So it tells you the scale of the challenge we have when we're talking about stuff that is more at the frontier of technological capability. It's something that we absolutely recognise. And as I said, I think in my first set of remarks, the adoption challenge is really knotty, and we have to ask some very hard questions of ourselves about how to make that work.
I was just nodding there.
I was reflecting that I was having a very similar conversation yesterday in an AI context about the broad digital skills agenda, and actually the component of that that's about how do you make sure that there are the digital skills and understanding and knowledge in the different user bases, different organizations that will be needed to drive uptake. And how do we think about the role of government in the case for public investment rather than private investment in doing that? How do we work with the breadth of different stakeholders in the landscape? Because there are lots of different actors in terms of the digital skills agenda, in my view. How do we bring those together to help drive some of the challenge that Dominic was identifying around that skills and understanding gap, perhaps, in terms of deploying new technologies? I think that's a really current kind of hot conversation in different bits of the government that Harry and I would probably both talk to. I don't know the answers to the questions entirely, but lots of people are thinking about it, is perhaps where I'm going.
Excellent, thank you, Anna. I think we're in violent agreement there, so I think that's probably a good time to close this session, actually. So we are just running 1 or 2 minutes over. We'd really like to continue the conversation. So can I thank everyone who provided the video content today? I think that was excellent. A lot of effort goes into those, and there was some excellent content there. Thank the panel, and obviously the KTN and the organisers as well for putting together a very well-run session. We'd like to speak to you some more, so we have to leave this session and join the next session, which is the collaboration session, Robots for a More Resilient Future. So I'm going to dial out of this and hopefully see you on the other side in a couple of minutes' time. But again, thank you very much.